Hello, first year students. We were doing textual interpretation of Richard Steele's essay, The Trumpet Club. I had already done half of the essay in the last video, and before I proceed further, let me give you a quick recap of what I had discussed with you earlier. So, Steele began with telling us about his usual custom to relax his mind and body in a company of men whose conversations are like preparative for sleep. They all are members of a club named Trumpet. Then he goes on to introduce the members of Trumpet Club. First was Sir Geoffrey Notch, a man who once had great property but lost it all in gambling over races and cockfighting games. Second member was Major Matchlock, a retired army man who fought in civil wars, and his talks too revolve around battles in which he took part. Third member was Dick Reptile, a lazy man who comes along with his young nephew in the club. And the fourth was an unnamed lawyer who entertains others with a story of Jack Ogle and some lines from the poem Hudibras. And if we pay attention to the names of members, we find that their names are symbolic of their personality, particularly their last name. For example, Sir Geoffrey Notch. Notch means score, a reference to games, and Sir Geoffrey's addiction to gambling games. Next, Major Matchlock. Matchlock is also a kind of gun, and again a reference to Major Matchlock's profession. Dick Reptile. Just like a reptile, Dick Reptile is described as a lazy man. So this is interesting to note the similarity between their names and personality. Now, let's continue the reading of the text. For my own part, I am esteemed among them because they see I am someone respected by others, though at the same time I understand by their behavior that I am considered by them as a man of a great deal of learning but no knowledge of the world. So the fifth and the last member of the club is author himself, and he says, for my own part, I am esteemed among them. Esteemed? I am respected among them. He says, I am respected by them because they see I am someone respected by others, only for the fact because others also respect me, and that's why the club members respect the author. That I am considered by them as a man of a great deal of learning but no knowledge of the world. But at the same time, the author says, they don't see me as a man of worldly wisdom. They respect me only for my education and for my bookish knowledge. I am considered by them as a man of a great deal of learning but no knowledge of the world. In so much that the major sometimes in the height of his military pride calls me the philosopher, and Sir Geoffrey no longer ago than last night, upon a dispute what day of the month it was then in Holland, pulled his pipe out of his mouth and cried, what does the scholar say to it? He says, this is obvious by their behavior to me, and it is to that extent that sometimes Major Matchlock, in height of his military pride, sometimes calls me a philosopher. And Sir Geoffrey also, no longer ago than last night, upon an argument asked my opinion, calling me a scholar. What does the scholar say to it? So, what author wants to say here in this para is that the members of the club respect him only for his learning, for his scholarly knowledge. They don't consider him a learned in the field of practical knowledge or in the ways of the world. Our club meets precisely at 6 o'clock in the evening, but I didn't come last evening until half an hour after 7, by which means I escaped the Battle of Naseby, which the major usually begins at about 3/4 after 6. The author tells us that we usually meet at the club exactly at 6 o'clock in the evening, but last night he couldn't reach on time and he got late for almost 1.5 hours, by which means I escaped the Battle of Nesby, which the major usually begins at about 3/4 after 6. So he couldn't hear the story of Battle of Nesby. Battle of Nesby, one of the battles of Civil War, which Major Matchlock usually begins at about 3/4 after 6. That means around at 6:45. I found also that my good friend, the bencher, had already spent 3 of his districts and only waited an opportunity to hear a sermon spoken of, that he might introduce the couplet where a stick rhymes to ecclesiastics. So he says, my good friend, the bencher, the lawyer. He also missed some couplets from Hudibras, always spoken by the bencher, by the lawyer. At my entrance into the room, they were naming a red petticoat and a clock, by which I found that the bencher had been diverting them with the story of Jack Ogle. He says, I got late, and when I entered into the room, they were busy in naming some garments, and by which he found that the lawyer, as always, was trying to entertain them with the story of Jack Ogle. So we come to know through this para that the members of the club had a definite pattern of conversation which they used to repeat on each and every single day. Major Matchlock always talked about battles. The bencher always either read some couplets from his favorite poem Hudibras, or he narrated a story of Jack Ogle. So the conversation among the club members was boring and repetitive, which helped the author to fall asleep insensibly, as he mentioned earlier in the essay. I had no sooner taken my seat than Sir Geoffrey, to show his goodwill towards me, gave me a pipe of his own tobacco and stirred up the fire. I look upon it as a point of morality to be obliged by those who endeavour to oblige me. Next he says, when I reached the club and took my seat, Sir Geoffrey gave me a pipe of his own tobacco. Sir Geoffrey offered me a pipe of his own tobacco and stirred up the fire. I look upon it as a point of morality to be obliged by those who endeavour to oblige me, and therefore, in requital for his kindness and to set the conversation a-going, I took the best occasion I could to put him upon telling us the story of Old Gauntlet. So the author took it as a kind gesture and feel obliged to Sir Geoffrey, and therefore, in order to return his favour and also to keep the conversation going, he asked Sir Geoffrey to tell his story of Old Gauntlet. Gauntlet was a fighting cock of Sir Geoffrey, and which he always tells with great interest and care, which he always does with particular concern. He traced up his descent on both sides for several generations, describing his diet and manner of life with his several battles, and particularly that in which he fell. So Sir Geoffrey begins to record the family history of this gauntlet, this fighting cock. As the author mentioned in the earlier part of the essay that Sir Geoffrey loved sports like cockfighting, dog and horse racing. So here he is telling about his fighting cock, about his diet, and about his fights in which he took part. This gauntlet was a game cock upon whose head the knight in his youth had won 500 pounds and lost 2,000. This naturally set the major upon the account of Edgehill fight and ended in a duel of Jack Ogles. The author tells us how Sir Geoffrey lost his 2,000 pounds and won 500 pounds by gambling over cockfighting, over this cock, this gauntlet. This naturally set the major upon the account of Edge Hill fight. Edge Hill fight is another famous battle of Civil War. And the mention of a fight naturally brings the major Matchlock to talk about Edge Hill fight, and the whole conversation ends with the mention of Jack Ogle again, and that of course by the lawyer. Old Reptile was extremely attentive to all that what was said, though it was the same he had heard every night for these 20 years, and upon all occasions winked upon his nephew to mind what passed. Author says, Old Reptile spoke very little, but always paid attention to whatever was being said, though it was the same he had heard every night for these 20 years, and upon all occasions winked upon his nephew to mind what passed. However, it was the same talk that he had heard since these last 20 years, and he time and again told his nephew to listen carefully to their talks. This may suffice to give the world a taste of our innocent conversation, which we spun out until about 10 of the clock, when my maid came with the lantern to light me home. Suffice means enough, sufficient. The author thinks it enough information about their conversation which they spun out. Spun out means which they continued for a long time until about 10 o'clock, and then he goes back to his home with his maid. I could not but reflect with myself as I was going out upon the talkative humour of old men, and the little figure which that part of life makes in one who cannot enjoy his natural propensity in discourses which would make him venerable. Venerable means respectable. And on his way back to home, the author would reflect upon the talkative nature of old man and about someone who cannot talk naturally in the same way. And this is the quality that makes him venerable, that makes him respected. I must own it makes me very melancholy in company when I hear a young man begin a story, and have often observed that one of a quarter of an hour long in a man of 25 gathers circumstances every time he tells it, until it grows into a long Canterbury tale of 2 hours by the time he is 80. I must own, he says, I must accept that I feel melancholy, that I feel sad in such company. And he observed also that when a young man of 25, that is 25 of age, that when a young man begins to tell a story, it would be about one of a quarter of an hour long in a man of 25. He says, when a young man begins to tell a story, it would be about 15 minutes long. One of a quarter of an hour long means about 15 minutes long, but over a period of time, he keeps adding circumstances, adding other details to the story until it grows into a size of long Canterbury Tales of 2 hours. Canterbury Tales is a book with a number of long short stories by the famous English poet Geoffrey Chaucer. So he says, by the time that young man is 60, 60 means that young man turns into the age of 60. When he turns 60. So he says, when a young man of 25 starts telling a story which was just about 15 minutes long at the beginning, but every time while narrating it, he keeps stretching it, and when that young man grows into a 60-year-old man, the story also grows from 15 minutes long to 2 hours long. The only way of avoiding such a trifling and frivolous old age is to lay up in our way to it such stores of knowledge and observation as may take us useful and agreeable in our declining years. The author suggests he is advising us, if we wish to avoid such boring, such trifling, frivolous old age conversation, such repetitive, useless old age conversation, then we should store up knowledge and observation in our youth to make it useful and acceptable in our declining years. Declining years means in our old age. The mind of man in a long life will become a magazine of wisdom or folly and will consequently discharge itself in something impertinent or improving. In a long life, the mind of a man in a long life will become a magazine of wisdom or folly. Author says, the mind of a man in a long life gets stored up either with wisdom or with folly or with foolishness, and therefore he will discharge it, he will release it in something useless or in something useful. Impertinent means in something rude or in something useless or in something improving. For which reason, as there is nothing more ridiculous than an old trifling storyteller, so there is nothing more venerable than one who has turned his experience into the entertainment and advantage of mankind. And for which reason? And for this reason only, the author says it's ridiculous to be a useless storyteller, and it's respectable, it's venerable to become a person who turns his experiences into entertainment, into benefit of mankind. In short, we who are in the last stage of life are apt to indulge ourselves in talk, ought to consider if what we speak worth being heard, and endeavor to make our discourse like that of Nestor, which Homer compares to the flowing of honey for its sweetness. In short, who are in the last stage of life, he says it's natural for us, for club members who are mostly old, to indulge ourselves in talk, to talk much. But we should consider before we speak whether what we are going to say, is it worth of being heard? Should we say it or not? And endeavor to make our discourse like that of Nestor, which Homer compares to the flowing of honey for its sweetness. Nestor was the oldest and wisest king of Greece in Homer's epic poem Iliad. So author says we should try to make our conversation like the wise Greek king Nestor, whose talk was compared by Homer to the flowing of honey for its sweetness. I am afraid I shall be thought guilty of this excess I am speaking of, when I cannot conclude without observing that Milton certainly thought of this passage in Homer when, in his description of an eloquent spirit, he says, his tongue dropped manna. Lastly, he says, I am afraid I shall be thought guilty of this excess. He says, I am afraid that I have said too much, but still I cannot conclude without observing. When Milton wrote his epic poem Paradise Lost, he definitely thought of Homer when he described an eloquent spirit. Eloquent spirit is a reference to one of the fallen angels whose name was Belial, and who was an excellent speaker in Paradise Lost. And in describing him, Milton wrote, his tongue dropped manna. Manna is a heavenly food. Belial was a gifted speaker in Paradise Lost, and his speech in that poem was compared to heavenly food. His words were not ordinary, they were heavenly. So Steele observes, just as Homer compared Nestor's conversation to a flowing of honey, in the same way Milton compared Belial's speaking ability to heavenly food, manna. So the central point of the essay emerges here in the concluding part of the essay, which is that one should not indulge in boring, repetitive, useless talks like the old men at the trumpet club, where everybody blows his own trumpet without giving a single thought at the content of their speech. So, Steele advises us through this essay to try to make our speech, our conversation worth hearing and beneficial to listeners. People shouldn't just talk for the sake of talking. As I had already told you that this essay is a periodical essay from Tetler, and in these periodical essays, Steele focused to reform society and its manners by criticizing them in a subtle, in a gentle manner. So with this, I end my discussion of the essay, The Trumpet Club. Thank you so much.